We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
We are, broadly speaking, agreed that we need to get on track towards a net zero, climate safe and nature positive future, but we know this will not be easy. And we're going to need to change behaviors of both individuals, but also the way that our industries and corporations and also our governments work and practice. We're going to need to do this through a mixture of carrots and hopefully perhaps not so many sticks, and some kind of mix. And there's a very active and live debate as to how we go about this. But we're likely to see an increasing move towards a more stick-like interventions into the future as things worsen if we're not able to act.
Designing these new little mini cities that they call districts, where your building is going to have 500 or 600 units for living, then it's going to have office space, then it's going to have retail, all in the same building. Meanwhile, it's only going to have a few parking spaces. They're literally putting huge signs in the streets, and they all look exactly the same, and it says City of Toronto rezoning, and they are all identical. You'll see a building that was there previously getting torn down, and you're going to see what they call a mixed-use development, and it has residences on top, office buildings and retail in the middle and the bottom, and then almost no infrastructure for parking. There's not even enough parking for the people living there. You're supposed to live upstairs, work somewhere in the building, go to the gym or your Starbucks or your grocery store, everything in the building. So basically, you're living on lockdown your entire life, just like they wanted you to do with COVID. Remember with COVID when you were on lockdown and they said you couldn't go more than 5 kilometers away from your house? Well, if you don't have a car, guess what? You're never going to go more than 5 kilometers away from your house. And that's what the 15-minute city is designed to do.
What exactly does that mean, 15-minute city?
Well, Jay, Cleveland says it hopes to be the first city in the U.S. to implement this model. And the idea is pretty simple. Everything you need is within 15 minutes of where you live, either on foot, by bike, or transit. It first took off in Paris. Instead of centralized downtowns where people work and separate places where they live, why shouldn't everything be closer? Well, that reduced proximity is greener, it's more sustainable, and it creates more solidarity between neighbors. But you can't start from scratch, obviously. So it's about repurposing existing spaces.
Talk to us about this concept of a 15-minute city. What's involved in it, and could it really be transported to the United States?
Well, yes, it can definitely be transported. It's very popular already in the United States.
Life from where you shop to where you work, all within a 15-minute walk.
Sounds pretty nice, right? Cities around the country are already doing it. NBC2 meteorologist Lauren Hope finds out if during Ian recovery, it could be a reality here in Southwest Florida.
Countless governments and companies have taken a stab at building a city of the future. There's Songdo in South Korea, the Alphabet-funded Quayside project in Toronto, which was abandoned in May of last year, and both Singapore and Barcelona have tried to modernize with smart sensors. In January of 2021, Saudi Arabia announced plans for its own futuristic city called The Line. Instead of communities sprawling outward from a central location, they would be built vertically and arranged, well, in a line, hence the name. Even though the vision for the city stretches 170 kilometers, it would do away with cars entirely and instead be connected by high-speed rail that would travel the entire length in just 20 minutes. And each individual community would be largely self-contained so that almost anything you could need, be it a school, a doctor, or a quick meal, would be only a 5-minute walk away. The government says the line will run on 100% clean energy and make extensive use of sensors and AI to manage the city's services. And all of this is supposed to be nestled in the pristine natural landscape of the Tabuk province with minimal impact on the environment.
Hi, my name is Faida Hassan, and I was the lead engineer on the development of the city plan, which is our long-term strategy for how our city grows, moves, and does all the great things that cities do. Actually, our understanding is that this is the first official plan in Canada, at least, that embeds its carbon budget into its plan. And that's a big deal because it means that everything within the plan has to be working towards that goal. So like I said, so that's one of the goals, is that we maintain our budget of 135 megatons, that we have net zero emissions per person.
ULEZ is a dirty word for many Londoners, it seems, as a number of newly installed TfL traffic cameras go missing. Cameras have already been vandalised or covered up by people who are against the widening of Sadiq Khan's clean air zone boundary across Greater London. But now it can be revealed that a number of cameras in various locations across the capital have been stolen. Protesters have climbed traffic poles and signals to remove the cameras, which will be used to recognise the number plates of cars that don't comply with upcoming new air pollution standards.
London ULEZ expansion is nearly here. From the 25th of October, the existing ultra-low emission zone is expanding from central London to the boundaries of North and South Circular roads. So who will have to pay a ULEZ charge? Vehicles will either have to meet the ULEZ emissions standards or pay a £12.50 daily charge to drive within the zone. Unless you're a lorry driver, it will cost you £100.
This is what one man can do to the ULEZ in less than half a day. Fuck your ULEZ, stick it up your arse, no one wants it, and this is what we'll do every time. I'm calling all people that want to take down these shit cunts. You need is a 10mm socket, yeah, very cheap to buy, to put in your impact drill. They're cheap to buy as well too. And you need a TX30 star bit. I'm trying to see if I can focus that. Yeah, TX30 star bit.
What do you think of the ULEZ?
Personally, I struggle to see how this is honestly going to make much of a difference to the environment or the air quality, as they say. But I do know it's going to make an awful difference to people that can't really afford to change their cars or pay the daily charge just to mainly go to work, which will be me, myself. That's exactly what I've got to do. So I've got to get rid of my car. So obviously it doesn't meet the ULEZ emissions, whatever they are, restrictions. So I've basically got to try and buy a new car just to come to work.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous, and I think it's going to hurt local high streets. I think just hearing that's even going to come to Hatch End, look at the businesses round here anyway, it's difficult to park, and this is going to make it even worse for small businesses like Anna's got with her nail shop. It's just going to affect independent trade.
Do you think the ULEZ is going to impact your business?
Certainly, yes, definitely. We have to use our cars on a daily basis, and most of the people that work here are coming in and out of the area on a daily basis. So yes, it will. It's very difficult for people to start looking at changing cars. We don't necessarily have the funds to do that straight away.
Do you think that this ULEZ expansion is going to impact your business?
Yeah, we think so, that it does impact a lot, because when the people will stop coming in this area due to ULEZ, of course it will reduce the business activity here.
What do you say to people hit by the cost of living, hit by record petrol prices, who say, well, this is going to be more than £12 a day for me to go about my daily business in London?
Well, the good news with the scheme we introduced in 2019 is actually most people got a compliant vehicle, and those that didn't chose to walk, cycle, or use public transport. The numbers of people who were compliant when I first announced the policy was 39%, and that's increased to 87% over the course of the first 2 years.
Oxford City Council has taken the climate crisis extremely seriously. So we declared a climate emergency a couple of years ago, and since then we've worked on lots of measures to reduce our carbon emissions. There's lots of commitment in this area. So the Zero Emission Zone was first committed to in 2014. Zero Emission Zone is a charging scheme, essentially. The only vehicles that are fully zero emission will be allowed into the zone free of charge.
the dead of night, a hooded figure removes a base plate for a bollard, then pours cement into the hole. The aim, to make it hard to install a new one. This footage, obtained exclusively by ITV Meridian, is one of hundreds of incidents of vandalism in Oxford's local traffic neighbourhoods. Those removing the barriers often don't even wait for the cover of night. Now, new figures show just how much this kind of activity is costing. A Freedom of Information request submitted by ITV Meridian has revealed the cost of replacing damaged LTM barriers has reached £73,000. To put that in perspective, it's half the cost of installing the barriers in the first place. And it's prompted the council to spend a further £100,000 to replace them with steel bollards, which will be less easily damaged. Maggie says the congestion is so bad she's often trapped in her own home and isn't surprised people are taking action to protest the LTNs, which she says are being rolled out against the will of residents.
I don't condone it, but I can understand it because they're not listening to us, and that's where the anger's coming in. You know, that and people being stuck in traffic. There is no democracy in Oxford.
Wanton vandalism or a form of civil disobedience. Either way, what's clear is these barriers are doing more than stopping traffic. They're dividing communities and creating rifts in the city. At the sharp end of it, businesses and delivery drivers, some filmed flouting the rules.
Early morning, a journey that used to take 5 minutes is taking parents 45 minutes.
The digital identity is not just a passport that you will have on your iPhone in a digital form. It entails just about everything the government would like to know about you. And yesterday in the Dutch media, we saw a perfect example of what it could entail in the near future. We had the CEO of one of the largest Dutch banks say, "Why don't we start with a personal carbon credit?" Oh. A carbon wallet, she called it, actually. Yeah. So right in line with the plans that the World Economic Forum people have for us. And she said it in a way that was particularly funny. She said, well, if everyone gets an individual personal carbon credit, why don't we make it so that rich people who, for example, want to go on holiday a little too often can buy personal carbon credit from other people who, for example, can't afford buying plane tickets or eating meat too often. So we can that way swap it out.
Oh, so if Bill Gates or Leonardo DiCaprio's carbon footprint is getting a bit too big, then some peasant living in his hovel up country somewhere can sell his, and he can't afford to go to Saint-Tropez, but he'll be able to sell his carbon allowance to Leonardo DiCaprio so Leonardo can park his yacht in Saint-Tropez for a couple of extra days.
Exactly right. That's it. So what will happen is the rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer, and they're saying it openly as if it's not a controversial thing at all. It's neo-feudalism. That's what it is. And they don't mind. You know, it's just, yeah, okay. Then they said, well, it's just a thought experiment, because obviously a lot of people were kind of upset about this communist ideal that they just presented to the people on TV as a good idea. So they said, oh no, it's a thought experiment. Well, we've heard that before.
Yeah. Centrally located, so we can save the planet. We're just going to keep track of how many miles you do in your car, whether you've taken one too many vacations in the Greek islands, if you're eating too many cheeseburgers. It'll all be centrally located, and that will make it all the more convenient for you.
Yeah, and they're being honest, so they're exposing their true agenda, because obviously the best way to get to a modern person's heart is to say that it's convenient for them. So yes, you won't have to carry all your different papers and your passports, but the downside of it is, and I hope that people will start to see this, that the government can shut you down. So you know, if you want to buy a burger, red screen, no Mark, not for you. That flight, not for you. Oh, but you can just buy it if you have enough money, right? So they're being very open and honest to what their goal is here. So we should take their words seriously and say, hell no.
So I decided that I would create an expert model to help visualize to people what is a 15-minute city. So come on in, let me show you what a 15-minute community looks like.
Well, I'm excited to see this, Randy, because you always break things down into nice practical ways, right?
Here we go. These residents of the 15-minute community, They're not locked in, but they just stay there. They're free to come and go, but they don't. So let's take a step inside. Everything they need in their life is right here in their 15-minute community. A water bowl, a feed tray. They own nothing, but they are exceptionally happy. And you know how happy they are is by how many eggs they produce. And it's so wonderful because I get to take everything that they produce, and they just keep producing. So let me go in here. And here we go. Each of them have their own house. Now, in a 15-minute community, you don't get a lot of variation in housing. They're all pretty much the same. But we can take a look and collect their production. There's a few. There's a few more. And there we go.
And they're none the wiser.
And they're happy.
Yeah.
I get to take what they produce. They're free to come and go, but the world is so scary for them out there, they will never leave. I don't have to put a fence around them. And here we are.
I'm very curious what your opinion is on 15-minute cities. This is something that I guess it's a new idea that we're only beginning to hear about. Maybe you can actually remind us what they are. And I understand they're coming in Europe now. There's legislation pushing in that direction already.
Yes, it is. The digital green certificate, the COVID pass, that was a test balloon to get people to having to produce some kind of a QR code, just getting people used to that. Now what they're slamming us with is these 15-minute cities. Make no mistake, it's not about your convenience. It's not that they want you to be able to, have all of these places that you need to get to very close. And it's not about saving the planet either, by the way. The 15-minute cities, they will have to have those before they can lock you down. And that's what we're talking about here. So in Great Britain, some county already passed legislation. They will be able to impose a climate lockdown. That's the next step. That's what we're talking about. So in order to do that, they will have to have these 15-minute cities. The next step then, of course, will be you are only allowed to leave your immediate area for, let's say, 2 or 3 times a year. So, but there's other people that may have more money and they can actually buy your passings off of you. So guess what? The poor people will be left in these 15-minute neighborhoods while the ones that are better off get to go wherever they want to go. So this is what we're talking about, Look at Saudi Arabia, for instance. They're pulling up Neom City. They call it the Line. So this is like a structure in the middle of the desert, 200 kilometers long, 200 meters wide, 500 meters high, and it will house up to 9 million people. Oh, isn't that just brilliant? If I wanted to get total control of the people, that's exactly where and how I would house them. And then having them on a 3 meals a day prescription, well, guess what will happen if you do not do as you are told? They will probably cancel that. It's so easy. So that's what we're talking about. And when you really take all of this together, there is no other way for me to actually say this. It will be a complete impoverishment and enslavement of all the people.
Recall we mentioned the United Nations Habitat 1 plan that came down at the Vancouver Convention in 1976. Under this plan, all humans that once lived on farms and in rural areas, so-called wildlands, will be relocated to cities, now referred to as human settlements.
And the idea is that if you concentrate populations into specific areas or zones, less energy usage, less water usage, and less transportation. So people will have less reason to leave home. They'll stay in their homes. They may even work out of their homes. And so they're not going to be using their cars, they're not going to be using energy, and they're not going to be using water. Smart growth, or new urbanism, is that ideology that says that you shouldn't have more space than you actually need. So if you're a couple of people living in a 3-bedroom house, well, you don't need that extra space. So why do you have it?
There's a clear, concerted effort to make it really just about as miserable as possible to exist and use your own private transportation, own your own home. All impetus and incentive, in financial and otherwise, is to convince people that it is unsustainable to live in your own home, have air conditioning. It is their duty as a human being, as a global citizen, you see. You basically exist and little more.
This is what one man can do to the ULEZ in less than half a day. Fuck your ULEZ.
I could stand here and say more or less what other people are going to say about the effect of these 15-minute neighbourhoods, soon to become digital ID facial recognition zones. Let's say my friend lives in zone 3 and I'm in zone 1. If, for example, I went to my friend's house in zone 3, my parents normally come and pick me up in their car. It only takes 10 minutes. So does that mean that they would have to go round the ring road and back into town again? If my mum or dad had to drive round the ring road, it would take 30 minutes, causing much more pollution and leaving a much bigger carbon footprint. They will say, you can walk home. Would that be safe for me to walk home? Me as a 12-year-old walking home in the dark alone. Is that really going to be safe? Then they will say, oh, don't worry about that. We've already thought of that. You'll be safe. We will have 1,000 cameras on the streets following you and tracking you all the way home. Oh, just remember, it's for your safety. What? Are you serious? Do you really think I want to be watched every second of the day? Are you serious? Thousands of cameras tracking my every move until I get home. At this point, I have to ask, is my safety that important to me that I want to be followed by cameras all the way home? Or do I prefer to have freedom than privacy? For your information, I still wouldn't feel safe. No amount of cameras is going to stop someone who wants to attack me. I want to be safe, but not to the extent that I am prepared to give up my freedom and my privacy to have it. As a 12-year-old, I am really concerned about my future. And to Klaus Schwab, I say this. How dare you!
How dare you!
How dare you steal my childhood and my future, and the future of all children by enslaving us in your crazy digital surveillance prison. We all know where this is leading. These are the first steps of a dystopian reality called 15-minute neighbourhoods. From a small seed, a huge tree can grow. Climate change is being used to control us, to nudge us in the direction the greedy people want us to go.